Hi, I'm Julia.
Hi, I'm Kayla, and we are super awesome writers.
Over the past few months, our teacher has put us through steps to being an author.
The first step was reading a historical fiction book. We did this to give us an idea of how a professional author weaves facts and fiction together.
Then we picked an author to study, to find the advice and the process of a professional author.
After that, we picked a historical event to research on.
When we were researching, we filled out 2 top-down webs, one of the fiction and one of the facts, and we made notes about our event we chose too.
When our class was done with the research, we started writing our own books.
Now we are going to have some of our classmates talk to you about their books.
First up, we have Cooper presenting about World War II.
Hello, my name is Cooper Freitas. I would like to talk to you about the steps I went through to make my historical fiction book. I chose to write about World War II. World War II is such a big topic that I decided to narrow it down to talk about one of the battles that was fought. The first thing the class had to do for this project was research an author that we liked so we could see different styles of writing. I chose Shel Silverstein because my favorite book is called The Giving Tree. This is one of his books that are not poems. The next step was to plan the historical fiction book. I had to do a lot of research about World War II. It was fun and I learned a lot because I explored a lot of facts. I concentrated on where the battles were fought. The battles were not fought in the United States, they were fought in Europe. One of the reasons I picked this topic was because my great-grandfather was in World War II. My father was given badges and photographs from him, which my dad showed me. I will use these to help me draw pictures for my historical fiction book. I'm so interested in this topic, I may do more research on my own after this project is over. Now back to you, Kayla and Julia in the studio.
That must have been really scary for your great-grandpa.
Next we will have Madison talking about the Great Chicago Fire.
Hi, I'm Madison from Mrs. Daron's 5th grade class, and I'm going to be talking about my process for my historical fiction book. First, I chose Tommy DePaula to research about for our author study. I chose Tommy DePaula because I thought his books are interesting. Tommy DePaula is a very good writer. He wrote a lot of funny and happy books. After I researched about Tommy DePaula, I did my brochure. I had a little trouble with it because I didn't really know what to write in it at first, but then I reread the rubric and it helped a lot. So I kept the rubric with me when I did my brochure, and it ended up coming out really good. Then I picked the Chicago Fire to research about for my historical fiction book. So I researched the Chicago Fire and I found some cool and interesting facts. When I had all the information I needed, I filled out my fact and fiction web, which was easy because I had all the facts I needed. When I was done with my fact and fiction web, I started my storyboard. The storyboard is to help plan our stories before. The storyboard has a beginning, middle, and end for writing some of our story, not the whole story. This part was fun for me because it wasn't hard for me at all. Finally, I started writing my historical fiction story. It's based on the Great Chicago Fire that happened in 1897. It took a while for the fire to go out because it was so big and it was really dry where the fire was. Even though it was a lot of work making my book, it was worth it because now I have my own amazing story. Now back to you, Julia and Kayla in the studio.
Wow, that'd be really scary.
Now we will have Kayla talking about 9/11.
Hi, I'm Kayla Melson. Mr. Daron's class had to choose an author and study him or her to see what advice they had for young writers. I picked Mary Pope Osborne because I read a lot of her Magic Treehouse books, and I think she is a good author, especially when you are trying to write an historical fiction book, because I write historical fiction books. When our class was done with the author study, we started to write facts on our factual top-down web. When we were done, I filled out our top-down web and organized the first draft of our story. Then we started to do different drafts. I struggled with adding details and weaving facts into the story so it didn't sound choppy. It was hard to do the perspective and make it sound not too boring. I fixed it by conferring with friends and teachers, but even though I had struggles, it was very fun. Back to you guys in the studio.
I like Magic Treehouse books too. Now we will have Julia talking about 9/11.
Hello, my name is Julia, and today I'm going to be talking about my process of reaching my goal to write an amazing historical fiction book. The first step was to make a brochure of an author of your choice, to learn about the process and learn from the advice of another author. I chose Dr. Seuss because I remember reading his books when I was a little girl. He has written so many books, I thought he would be a good person to learn from. Then everyone in my class read a historical fiction book to see how some authors weave facts into the fiction part of the book. After that, we started to research. My whole class filled out a top-down web of the facts and the fiction that we are going to put into our stories. And we made notes about our event too. Then we started our drafts, and let me tell you, it was hard. We started with the storyboard for the books, and then we started our drafts. I had to edit my draft so many times, I lost track of the number. My strongest struggle was finding the voice of my story. What helped me get rid of this struggle was conferencing with my teacher and friends.
The dad in the story must have been really scared.
Now we will have Kayla talking about the Titanic.
Hi, my name is Kayla. Today I will be telling you the process I went through of making my historical fiction book. The author that I chose was Andrew Clements because I had read some of his books before and I really liked them. Also because I liked how he had a funny, silly kind of style. Our class chose a historical fiction book to read to give us an idea of how to place everything together in our own books. Here's an example using my book, Titanic Crossing. In the book, it would put facts and fiction together. Instead of just saying they hit an iceberg hard, they would say the captain said to go full speed ahead when they hit the iceberg. The third step my class went through was starting research on our historical event. I chose the Titanic. I filled out 2 top-down webs, one with factual events and one with fiction to add to my story. First, on the fact side, I put how Edward John Smith was the captain of the Titanic and how the ship was 400 miles from land when it sank. Then, on the fiction side, I put different things in, like the characters got separated and they couldn't find each other. When I started writing my historical fiction book, I went through a lot of drafts and had people in my class edit to make it better and better. I think the hardest part for me was showing how the characters' feelings were without saying he was sad or she was happy. So I looked at the other historical fiction books like Titanic Crossing and George Washington's Socks to give me ideas on how other authors showed their characters' emotions. That helped me a lot because I spent so much time revising and researching. My book improved and changed so much to my first to my final draft. Back to you in the studio, Julia.
Wow, I would love to be on the Titanic. Well, except for the part where it sinks. Thanks for watching SAW, Super Awesome Writers.
Our group is called SJJNSAD, which stands for Sam, Joseph, Jameson, Sarah, Nikki, and Daniel.
Hello, today our group will talk about what we did about the historical fiction books we wrote and things prior.
First up, we have Daniel doing the Boston Tea Party.
Hello, my name is Daniel. I would like to talk to you about the process of writing a historical fiction book. I spent a little bit of time thinking about which historical event I want to write about. I picked the Boston Tea Party from a list of historical fiction events that my teacher gave us at school. After she told us about the project, I picked it because my sister was doing it too. I thought it would be a good idea because we could talk about things together. The next thing I did was research facts. This took a while. I went online and found some facts about the Boston Tea Party. Some facts that the king made the colonists pay high taxes for the tea. It made all the colonists angry because they drank lots of tea in 1773. Samuel Adams and Thomas Hutchinson and some colonists from the Sons of Liberty met in the tavern. The Sons of Liberty dressed up like Native Americans so they wouldn't get caught and climbed onto 3 ships and dumped the tea in the water. They dumped about 340 boxes of tea into the water. It happened on December 16th at night. It took place in Boston Harbor in Boston Harbor. one person did get caught. I found researching hard, but I thought it was very interesting because they did this because of tea and the high taxes. My next part of the project is making a historical fiction book. I wrote a story based on the Boston Tea Party. Some of it is true and some of it parts are false. To make it interesting, then I drew pictures to go with the story. This story was the hardest part because I didn't like to draw. I hope you enjoyed listening and learned something about the Boston Tea Party.
Interesting, Daniel.
Thank you, Daniel. So now we have Jameson telling us the process of his story.
Hello, I'm Jameson, and for class we had to write an historical fiction story, but our class had a long process we had to go through first. First, we did an author study to know how an author writes. We also got advice from that author. My author was Lincoln Pierce. Next, we did a top-down web to get ideas for our story and to organize it. We did a facts one and a fiction one. After we did that, we started our rough draft on a historical fiction story. Mine was The First Man on the Moon. I first did a draft where I just put the main ideas in, then I added the details. I added 2 made-up characters named Tua Tagovailoa and Mohamed Sanu. They are both football players I like. Then I conferenced with my teacher to improve my story. Here are some facts on the event. The first man on the moon was Neil Armstrong. The second was Buzz Aldrin. Michael Collins was also on that mission, but he never stepped foot on the moon. Neil Armstrong was the commander of the mission. They blasted off July 16, 1969. The spaceship they used was the Apollo 11. It took them 4 days to get to the moon. They traveled 7 miles a second. When they landed on the moon on July 20th, 1969, Neil got out, then Buzz. They did experiments, took videos, and observed the moon. They stayed on the surface of the moon for about 20 hours. Then they started headed back to Earth. It took them 4 days to get back to Earth, and they landed July 24th, 1969. They were congratulated when they got back, and there were many reporters there. The whole world was watching. That was my process and some facts from the event I chose. I really enjoyed doing this and want to do another one on a different event. Now back to Nikki and Joseph.
Wow, Jameson, that's a lot of steps.
Now here is Sarah, who is doing the Civil War.
Hello, my name is Sarah from Mr. Duran's 5th grade class. Today I'll tell you all about my process of doing a historical fiction book. The first thing I had to do was figure out what author I wanted to study and write about. So after a long time of trying to find an author, I finally picked out Margaret Peterson Haddix. That was hard for me because I didn't know what author was my favorite. After I finished picking out my author, I had to fill it out a top-down web. After that, I moved on to picking out my historical fiction event. I chose the Civil War. Picking out the Civil War was hard because I wasn't sure about all the different parts. What I did to fix that was I just picked out one small part of the Civil War for the topic. After that, I started to write my historical fiction book. That was a little hard because I didn't really know what to write at first, but then it got easier after I talked to my teacher about it. And those were my process. Back to you, Nikki and Joseph.
Good job doing the Civil War, Sarah.
Next up, we have Sam doing the Battle of Gettysburg.
Hi, I'm Sam, and today I'm going to talk about my author study on Mike Lupica and my historical fiction book on the Battle of Gettysburg. I chose Mike Lupica for my author study because I read a lot of his books, and he writes sports books. Also, I did not know much about Mike Lupica. I chose the Battle of Gettysburg for my historical fiction event because I didn't know a lot about the Battle of Gettysburg. I am also going to talk about the process of completing my project with the goal of writing a historical fiction novel. First, my 5th grade class had to make a pamphlet for our author study, and we had to include some information so we knew what the author had to go through with the process to help us write our historical fiction books. All books are based on a real event. When I chose my author, I couldn't get the information because I couldn't get on the website. So I had to change my author again, then I had to change it a few more times. Finally, I chose Mike Lupica, and I could get all the information I needed, and I could get on his website. Next, we had to make ideas for a historical fiction story. I chose the Battle of Gettysburg for my historical fiction book because I also didn't know a lot about it. When I was researching, I found a lot of interesting facts. I had trouble making my story because at first my story wasn't catchy and it didn't make sense. Before that, I couldn't find a good topic to write about. Also, I jumped from topic to topic and didn't explain each topic. I also had to change some of the words. When I read my story out loud, I saw all the mistakes. Finally, I realized all my mistakes, and it sounded much better than my first draft. When I finished the process, I really enjoyed the end result. Also, I felt proud of myself when I finished my historical fiction novel. Now back to Nikki and Joseph.
Now we have Joseph doing Ancient Egypt.
Hello, my name is Joseph Lang. Today I will talk about why I did to write a book. First I will say some things about me. I like to do Scratch, which is a coding language and website. I like to do Roblox, and I don't like to do Roblox, and I like playing Terraria. When the project for writing a historical fiction book was announced, I had the idea of Egypt because I read the Red Pyramid and liked it. So I took a library book about Egypt. I already knew some things from the Red Pyramid. So that made it easier. We did top-down web for facts about what we're doing and ideas for our story. So on my storyboard, I wrote about kids who are doing an Egypt project, and a bully knocks them out. But when they regain consciousness, they wake up in Egypt. While they're in Egypt, they meet some of their classmates while they're there. They do a few things, and then they wake up. Then they go to Jack's house to get their project. In their project, they have a VR game and canvas that shows Egypt. When we go to present their project, they get an A+, and the difference in is copying them got an F-. I like the book project because I like writing stories that I can write what's on my mind. Thank you for watching. So we're going to go back to the studio, and I'm going to continue my position as an anchor. Bye. Now we have Nikki Santos doing Pearl Harbor.
Hello, I'm Nikki, and I am here to tell you about my historical fiction book. My historical fiction book is about the bombing of Pearl Harbor. On my journey of writing this book, I have came across so many facts I didn't know. For example, Pearl Harbor was an American Navy base in Hawaii. Here are some other interesting facts about Pearl Harbor. The Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor. The bombing started at 7 a.m. to 9:05 a.m. 450 planes came in 2 waves, one at 7:30 and one at 8:45. Each wave was 45 minutes apart. Before the planes hit, the Japanese commander screamed "Tora-Torna," meaning "Tiger, Tiger." It was their code word. And at least 5 ships were down and 3 were severely affected. The historical fiction story that I wrote was about 2 male soldiers that escaped Pearl Harbor and how they helped Hawaii with the aftermath of the bombing. Also, it has a very good ending. I think I did a good job. What I had trouble on with in my book was finding the right vocabulary and the right voice for my characters. What this lesson helped me improve on was my vocabulary, my voice, and my character personality. Things that I had to think about were the usual things, like setting characters, problems, solutions, voice, and vocabulary. What I liked about this project was conferring with Mrs. Daron. Also, in this lesson, I learned a lot about Pearl Harbor, the boats, and my family history because my grandpa's uncle escaped Pearl Harbor as a Navy SEAL. This was a hard but fun project and was worth the time. Now back to my fellow anchors.
Good job, Nikki.
Thank you for watching us today. It was fun. Bye.
Hello, we are from VIEW, very unique writers.
Today, we'll be showing you the progress our 5th grade class made of writing our own historical fiction books.
Everyone in our class picked their own historical fiction book to read.
We read our book to see how it was written and to give us ideas for when we wrote our own. That took quite a while.
Yeah, but that project was fun.
Next, we had our author study project.
My author was Kirby Larson. Some of you might know she wrote Dash.
Well, my author was Margaret Peterson Haddix. Some of you know she wrote Running Out of Time.
We picked our favorite authors and studied on them, also to help us become an author.
Then we made a pamphlet about them.
Then our teacher took them and hung them outside for everyone to see.
Then we were finished with that project. Coming up next, we're researching on our historical event.
We picked a historical event that happened in the past.
Then we started researching on our event.
They were mostly storms, but a lot were like 9/11 and the Titanic.
Well, mine was a storm.
Same with mine.
Miss Daron's class were all given 2 top-down webs to organize our information.
One of them was facts about our topic, and the other one was fiction that we made up. It helped us start our story.
Next, we made a storyboard to help us with planning and organizing our story.
It was technically our first draft, just a smaller and less complex version.
If you want to put it that way, sure.
Then once we were finished, we went to Mrs. Daron and started editing with her.
Once we edited with her, we would go back on the computer and fix our story.
Then we kept going back to Mrs. Daron, to the computer, and to her, to the computer, and to her, and to the computer.
And it can go on and on and on.
And then our story was made.
I think this project was really fun and made my writing better.
I liked it as well. I think it helped my vocabulary.
Now other members of our class will share their experience.
First up is John and Glacy talking about the 2003 NBA draft.
My 5th grade class had to write a historical fiction story. Before this, my class had to do an author study where you had to pick an author that you liked and research them. Then make a pamphlet about that author and include some advice, books that he made, and how he resonated with you. I picked Jeff Kinney as my author because his books were the only ones I enjoyed in 3rd grade. Then there was the process of making my historical fiction. The hardest part of this for me was finding a historical event to write about. I decided to pick an event that I would enjoy to research, which was the 2003 NBA draft. After I found my event, I started to research some facts and put in some fiction on the top-down webs that we used to organize our writing. I couldn't find that many facts, but managed to find enough to write down, like Carmelo Anthony was drafted 3rd overall. Some fiction in my story is I added NBA stars Kyrie Irving, Giannis Antetokounmpo, Damian Lillard, and Kristaps Porzingis because I like basketball. I also added the bad guy, Carlos, because that is my friend's dad's name. After that, I had to make illustrations. Finally, after all of that, it came to this, the script. It took a little while to think of what script or what I was going to say, but I finally came up with one. What helped me was making a 2-column notes before I started typing up the script. Then I had to confer with Mrs. Daron on my 2-column notes. Finally, I finished my script. It was fun making our own historical fiction book, and I liked doing it too. Back to you.
Wow, I didn't know Carmelo Anthony did that.
Next up is Gabe Rivera telling you about Apollo 11.
Hello, today I'm going to be talking about why I chose my historical event and how I was able to write this story. The assignment was to write an organized historical fiction book about a true event in history. The event that I chose in my historical fiction was Apollo 11. I chose Apollo 11 because I wanted to try learning something new, and I'm glad I did that. The first step that I took to writing my historical event was my author study. The author study was when I had to pick one of my favorite authors, and my personal favorite is Jeff Kinney. I picked Jeff Kinney because he is an author that has passion in his writing. He also wrote my favorite series, Diary of a Wimpy Kid. I had to pick an author because then I can get a step closer to the very big step, my historical fiction book. The second step that I took to writing my historical event was a top-down web. A top-down web is like a graphic organizer. It helps me organize my paragraphs. I filled out 2 top-down webs. One was about the facts of my event, and the other was when I incorporated fiction into my story. On the fictional part, I had fictional characters, problems, solutions, and settings. On the facts, I had real characters, problems, solutions, and settings. And here are some facts about Apollo 11. 1. Only 2 of the 3 astronauts got out of the shuttle and started on the moon. 2. The mission took 8 days to get to the moon and back to Earth. 3. President JFK was the person who came up with the mission Apollo 11. The struggles that I had while writing my author study, top-down webs, and historical fiction book were word choice and voice. I had a hard time with this because I didn't read much at all, but now I read a lot, and that is helping me get better and better at writing. Now back to Maddie and Adrian in the studio.
8 days? Wow, I could do a lot more than 8 days than just stay in a shuttle waiting to arrive at the moon. Now we have Grace Houston telling you about Hurricane Sandy.
Hi, my name is Grace, and I'll be telling you a bit about my historical fiction story and my author study. My historical fiction story, called Escaping Hurricane Sandy, is about a girl who finds out that Hurricane Sandy is going to come to her neighborhood, and her family leaves her behind without knowing. She's trapped in her house during the storm. Even her house gets crushed by a boulder, and she has to hide in the sewers. A real fact about Hurricane Sandy is that it was the biggest U.S. hurricane ever recorded. For my author study, I studied Andrew Clements. He wrote tons of books. 2 I really liked were The Landry News and The Holiday Concert. I picked him as an author to study because I knew he was a wonderful author and I love his books. One thing I struggled with is I needed some information about how he became a writer, so I kept researching and found some information. One day at school, Andrew Clements was doing a writing test, and when he got his test back, his teacher said that he did a really good job and he should be an author one day. So that is how he became an author. Well, that is all I had today about my historical fiction story and Andrew Clements, the author I studied. Back to you, Maddie and Adrian.
Wow, the most powerful hurricane ever? Yikes, I would not like to be in there.
Next up for a presentation is Maddie Couture sharing the Joplin tornado with you.
Hello, my name is Maddie. Today I'll be showing you my progress of being a successful writer. It all started when Mrs. Daron's class was assigned to read a historical fiction book of their choice and researching it. I read Old Town and Green Groves by Cynthia Ryland. The purpose to read the historical fiction book was to see how it was written. Once everyone finished that, we all decided on what historical event everyone wanted to research on. They picked their own event to research because later on we would make a book about it. I did the Joplin tornado because I remember in 2nd grade I went on YouTube and I saw this video about the Joplin tornado. I watched it and I thought it was very interesting. Later in 3rd grade we had to study a state. I chose Missouri because the Joplin tornado was in Joplin, Missouri. Some facts about the tornado is that it was one of the deadliest tornadoes ever to be recorded. It was half a kilometer wide and destroyed almost everything in its path. I would not like to be in that storm. After researching, I started on my story. That was pretty hard because I really didn't know how to start, but I just started thinking and I found out a character in my story could say something. I later finished the story and made illustrations. They were probably the hardest thing to the story because I had to figure out the perfect drawing to draw on each page. Well, I can't take back the illustrations were the hardest thing. A lot of things were hard for me. It was hard for me to sew the facts into the fiction. I have a lot of fiction themes in my story, but how will I add the facts, I asked myself. How will I learn the storm if there's barely any facts, I kept asking. But I just found out the characters in my story could say it. If you're planning to write your own story, I have some advice for you. Keep trying no matter what. Don't give up because it isn't over. Like I said before, sew it in a place you think is right. Make it a great story by adding a few things here and there. I hope my advice helps you and that you enjoyed my presentation. Back to you, Adrian, in the studio.
Wow, I sure wouldn't like to be in that storm either. Destroying everything, that could destroy me.
And drum roll please for the last presentation. Adrian Mercado will be telling you about Hurricane Katrina.
Hello, my name is Adrian Mercado, and I'm going to talk to you about my historical event. First, I have to tell you what the event is. The event is Hurricane Katrina. Here's some facts about the hurricane. Hurricane Katrina was a Category 5 hurricane and started off as a little storm, then grew and grew into a hurricane. Yikes! I would not like to be in that situation. Hurricane Katrina was so strong that it blew down most trees and buildings in the area, and it caused a little flood. Most people had to go to another state, go to shelters, and some even refused to do either. Hurricane Katrina damaged a ton of states, including Alabama, the Bahamas, New Orleans, Ontario, Ohio, etc., etc. Did you know that Hurricane Katrina was the 3rd strongest and largest hurricane ever to be recorded? I bet not. The wind speed that Hurricane Katrina was 175 miles per hour. That's pretty strong for a hurricane. This was a pretty fun project, and I hope you do it again. Okay, that's it for now. Back to you, Maddie.
A little storm can't hurt, right? Well, this one can. How can it turn into such a big hurricane so fast?
Well, that is all for now. We all hope you liked our presentation.
We all hoped you learned something. See you next time on View. Very unique writers.
Hello, and welcome to ABCDE. Hi, I'm Blake.
Hi, I'm Cole. First up, we have Daniela to talk about her historical fiction writing process.
Hi, my name is Daniela from Mrs. Daron's 5th grade class, and today I'll be talking about my process on writing my historical fiction book. The first thing my class and I did was we researched about authors. The author I chose was Barbara Parks. I chose her because I've been reading her book since 2nd grade. My favorite book is Junie B. Jones' First Grader. I love that book. I think it's super funny. The second thing we did was we did a brochure on our authors. I had to find a lot of facts. That was one of the most important things we had to add. The third thing we did was we started researching about our historical event. I chose the Civil War. I chose that historical event because I wanted to know more about it. It was super difficult to find a good website with good facts, but after a while, I found an awesome website with really good facts. I think my historical fiction book came out great. My historical fiction book was about a family going through the Civil War. One day, the parents get into a big fight and decide to go their separate ways. After they tell the kids get really upset and run away to a desert 23 miles away from home. And after they go missing, the parents find out about the war and that it is happening in 2 weeks. 5 years later, the war ends and the family became united again. I think my historical fiction book came out great, and I loved researching about the Civil War, and I would definitely do it again. Now back to you, Cole and Blake.
Wow, Daniela, those are some interesting facts about the Civil War.
Up next, we have Emmett talking about the Boston Massacre.
Hi, I'm Emmett, and like some of you, I thought writing a book would be easy. But after doing it myself, I found it was a lot harder than I thought. When my teacher told my class we were going to write a historical fiction novel, I was really excited. I'd always wanted to write a book. We started by making a storyboard. At first, I didn't know what my historical event should be, but eventually I decided to do the Boston Massacre. After I finished the storyboard, I started to research, and I found out that 5 died in the Boston Massacre and 6 were injured. After that, I started typing my story. It took a while for me to come up with some of the smaller details, but I think in the end my story came out pretty well. I love this project. It was so much fun writing from a first-person point of view, and I recommend to all of you do the same. You can find my book at Barnes & Noble or on Amazon. Thanks for watching. Now back to you at the studio.
Wow, Emmett, I can't believe 5 people died.
And 6 people were injured too.
Now we have Ava to talk about 9/11.
Hi, I'm Ava, and I'm going to be talking about my writing process. I started my writing process with the author study my class and I did. The author study was to choose an author and research about him or her and make a brochure about the author you chose. I chose Dr. Seuss for my author. I chose him because I grew up always reading his books, and he wrote lots of books. I filled out a top-down web full of facts from my brochure. Then when I was done with that, I did my brochure. My brochure had lots of interesting things about Dr. Seuss. Then I started on my own historical fiction book. The first thing I had to do was choose a historical event that happened, so I chose 9/11. Before I could start, I had to plan it out first. My teacher, Mrs. Daron, made that very easy by giving us a top-down web and a storyboard. The first thing I did was fill out my top-down web and research about the 9/11. The facts that I found I put in the top-down web. Then, with the facts from the top-down web, I did my storyboard. The storyboard has a beginning, middle, and end, and it helps you so you can know what order to write your story in. The storyboard really helped me when writing my story. Then I made my first draft of my story. I didn't really like how it came out, so I redid some of my story and added more facts to it. And my story came out really well. For me, it was really hard to have enough facts into my story, but you may have a little trouble at first, but as long as you keep trying, you could do it. Now back to you, Cole and Blake in the studio.
Wow, Ava, I really liked how you redid some of the facts and how it came out. Now Blake will talk about Jackie Robinson and his process of writing his historical fiction book.
Hello, my name is Blake. Today I'm going to be talking about the planning involved with writing my historical fiction picture book. I started with my author study and studied Jeff Kinney. I liked this project because we did a few top-down webs and I did a pamphlet. I really liked this pamphlet project because it was good to research Jeff Kinney's process and advice. One hard part for me though was to find the author's advice because I had to watch many videos, but I did it. I like how Mrs. Daron gives us top-down webs. These sheets help you brainstorm much better. They are very useful to write stories, and if I need to correct, I just use one of these. These are very useful for everything I've done in class. After this, I wrote an historical fiction about Jackie Robinson and how he broke the color barrier in the MLB. He is one of the people that I look up to. Jackie Robinson was unaware about things that were going on around him at the time, like getting death notes and that people that didn't like him were going out at night and trying to kill him. Some white people thought it was unfair how black people didn't get to play. I've watched the movie and read a few books about him, and from reading more about him, I've learned a lot more. Now back to you in the studio, Cole.
Wow, that's scary how Jackie Robinson was getting death notes.
Definitely. Now Cole will talk about his process for his historical fiction.
In my class, we did an author study to see how authors write a book and to get advice on writing a book and to find their style of writing. I picked Rick Riordan. After the author study, we did research on a historical event we picked. I picked 9/11. We had to research the event and then make a historical fiction book. I had to go to 6 different sites to find the right facts. After the research, we had to make the historical fiction book. It was actually pretty hard. I thought it was going to be easy. My story is about a man who works in the South Twin Tower and gets to the bottom unharmed, but the tower starts to fall, so he barricades himself in with a piece of metal from the planes. He survives for over 12 hours under the rubble when he is found. He is in bad condition, but he survives. I like doing this project and researching a lot about 9/11. I learned a lot about it. Now back to you, Blake.
Wow, that must have been scary if you were in one of those buildings at the time.
Thank you to all of our fabulous presenters, and thanks for watching ABCDE.